Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. We greet our listening audience with the greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum. And Ramadan Mubarak. So, let's see. Today, we're going to be looking at Surah 2, chapter 2, verse 185. I believe we have been over this verse before at the beginning of Ramadan, and now we're down to the end of Ramadan. Perhaps Friday is the day of the celebration. It's the celebration day of Ramadan. We should count the Eid day as one of the days of Ramadan, not one of the days of Shawwal. It's one of the days of Ramadan. It's the last day of Ramadan, Eid al-Fitr, which many of us know the Eid is Friday. And with our subject today, we have to really stop practicing from the leadership deception. So let us begin reading the verse. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Qur'an. So with Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, the month of Ramadan is that which the Qur'an, we start with Qur'an, was sent down in it. Unzila fihi, was sent down in it. Hudan. Hudan, we would say guiding. Guiding Linasi for mankind, or guidance for mankind. And this is all of mankind, not just the Muslim. It didn't say Hudan lil Muslimin. It says Linasi, all of mankind, the Quran. Wabayinatin, and clarity. So this bayinatin is a conjunction to Hudan. It's guidance and clarity, min al-Huda, from the guidance. Clarity. Clarity, we say, of guidance, of the guidance, from the guidance. Wa al-Furqani, and the differentiation. Differentiation. So this al-Furqani is in conjunction with al-Huda. So you would say it's clarity from guidance and the having the ability to differentiate. And to do that, it would be defining guidance. Having the ability to differentiate helps understand the idea of guidance, of clarity. Pardon me, clarity. Clarity. Because to be clear, you have to be able to differentiate one thing from another. And which we're going to be talking about in particular, to differentiate between guidance, what is the guidance, and what is deception. Let us look at now the tafsir from Jalalain, the comments of Jalalain on the verse. So the first part, Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Qur'anu, he's saying it's min lawhi al-mahfudhi. Min lawhi al-mahfudhi. This is an expression in the Qur'an itself. It's taken from the Qur'an itself, meaning the preserved tablet. Preserved al-mahfuz is the preserved, al-lahu is like a tablet. So that this Qur'an, he is saying, is from a preserved tablet. This idea of the preserved tablet is that all of the scriptures, especially what we call the heavenly scriptures, the scriptures, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Qur'an, they are called the heavenly scriptures because we have the idea that they all come down from the heavens. And this is spiritually speaking. Ila as-sama'i, he says, to the heaven, ad-dunya, to the earthly heaven, if we want to put it in that context, to the lower heavens or the earthly sky heavens. But as we have said before, and I will repeat, that when we're talking about the samad, the sky, we're not talking about a sky outdoor sky that we look at to determine the weather, or the sun and the moon is going across, what have you. Not that sky, because this tablet is not preserved in that sky. The Qur'an did not come down, unzila, did not descend from the sky. This as-sama'i is in the sky of man's spirituality. And this idea of it coming down is coming down from a high, noble place. That's why sometimes we call it the noble Qur'an, the glorious Qur'an, so forth and so on. It's coming from a high, respectable place in terms of man's spirituality. And it's preserved in a tablet, and this tablet has in it all the scripture. Even we may even make the connection between Allahul al-Mahfuz to the abundance. When we spoke about the river of abundance. Fi laylatil qadri, in the night of power, or this night of a great energy that many of us celebrated or commemorated perhaps last few days. And this is said by tradition to be one of the odd nights of the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So if we're looking at all of this in a metaphorical sense of the sky, the Lawhul Mahfuz, the night of power, then all of this suggests to the mind that Ramadan is a ritual month, not a calendar month. This night, Laylatul Qadr, it's not a calendar. It's not a calendar night. It's a ritual night. So it's speaking, metaphorically speaking, if we understand. So I reiterate this through repetition so that over a period of time we will begin to understand. Then, if you're counting the last 10 nights, then you should have an idea of how many nights you began with to count ahead of time in order to know what's the last 10 nights, the odd nights of the last 10 nights. It's easy, simple 6th grade math in order that we eradicate confusion and using language for common people that's deceptive language. It's deceptive language. So you're counting 30 nights. That's how you know what's the last 10 nights of the 30 nights. You start with night 21. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That's 10. 30 nights. That's it. That's the ritual, not the calendar. Not man's calendar. It's the ritual. 30 nights. So simple. And then the 30th day, which comes after the night, is the Eid al-Fitr. It's part of that night. That day is part of that night. You're counting it. So it's part of a day in the month of Ramadan. Now that's against what you've been hearing. But I'm not using deception. So from the time we went out and sighted the crescent, we count 30 nights. Friday is the 30th day. The deception is we have to wait for the sighting of the crescent, but we all know you were told last Jummah that the Eid is Friday because the Imam or whoever is not going to see you again until Friday. So you have to know ahead of time. You have to know ahead of time when the Eid is, or else you will miss it. So he told you Friday, but yet he's telling you if the moon is sighted. But he's not going to sight the moon. Nobody's going to go out and sight the moon. The Eid is Friday. And they should be straight and say it's Friday. But they can't tell you, they don't want to tell you, and most of them don't know to tell you the method that they're using to determine what they're doing. Because if they tell you that, it'll be easy for you to do too. And they don't understand because of religious deception. Yes. They don't have for the Qur'an. For the Qur'an. And most of the people don't have for the Qur'an. So you're still confused. Hudan. Bin Hudan. From it, he's saying, from it is guidance. And this guidance, he's saying, is hal. Hal is the condition. Guidance is the condition in which it was sent down. So this Hudan, let me speak a little grammar here for a minute. Hudan is in the accusative because hal is a rule for the accusative. It's in the accusative, meaning that it's going to be a noun that ends in feta or tanween feta. But Hudan is going to be, as a word, Hudan is always Hudan. There's no Hudun, there's no Hudin. It's always Hudan. So in this sense, it is Hudan, meaning that it is in the accusative. Because it's the condition in which it was sent down. And when we have a noun in the accusative, the basic rule is that it's going to be associated with or influenced by a verb. The verb here is unzila. So it's coming down. It's coming down, and the condition in which it's coming down is coming down as guidance. It's guiding. That's the condition. Hadiyan, he said, as guidance. Min ad-dalalati, from error. Guidance from error. And these are words that we have in Al-Fatiha. Al-Fatiha, we'll say, ihdi. Ihdi, guide us. Ihdina, guide us. And then we have Dalin, error, straying from the path. So these words are defining itself in Al-Fatiha. Just to bring that to your attention. This idea of Hudan. Hudan is guidance, meaning that guidance from straying, from error. Linnasi wa bayinatin, for all of mankind, wa bayinatin. So let us go back and look here just to make connections. So Lahul Mahfuz, if he's saying this preserved tablet has in it all of the scriptures. And over a period of time, the scriptures coming down from the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Qur'an, through stages, coming down to prophets, or coming down with the prophets, from stages, from one stage to another until the completion of the Qur'an. So therefore, we could say in context that this Qur'an, the last of the scripture from the Lahul Mahfuz, from the preserved tablet, will be for all of mankind. Not just for a certain segment of mankind. It's for all of mankind, because this preserved tablet has all of the scripture. All of the scripture comes from it, and it's for all of mankind. Linnas. Well, by Yunatin, he's defining as ayatin wadihatin, meaning clear, lucid, precise. You can say signs. Ayat is signs. These are ascending signs that points to a higher universal reality, or some we use this word ayat to say verses, the verses. But the verses in the Quran are signs, and the verses should be read as signs. Then we don't have, grammatically speaking, they're not sentences. You don't have sentences. You have signs, because many of them are not sentences. And as you learn to read the signs and connect the signs, they have an ascending effect, meaning that they're always pointing to a higher universal reality. This is the nature of Scripture itself. So in a sense, we could say, unzila, it comes down, ayatin, it's in the form of signs that takes you back up. Min al-huda, from the guidance, mimma yahdi ila al-haqqi, from that which guides to al-haq, to the universal reality, al-haq, the truth. The truth, the al-haq, is the word I'm using to say the universal reality. So it guides you to that with its signs. Min al-ahkami, from the or of or from the decisions or even the logic that you receive from the signs or decisions that you make in your life, the judgments that you make. El-Hakam, this word Hakam, it's a very rich word, like many of the Quranic Arabic words, that you're guided to the universal reality in your thinking or decision-making process, your governance, your judgment, and or the logic that you follow to its conclusion. Where and min al-Furqani. So he's defining al-Furqan here. Mimma yufarriqu bayn al-haqqi wal-batili. It differentiates from what differentiates between the universal reality and the false deceptions. This is Furqan, which in translations it may read right from wrong. But in a broader sense, you want to be able to differentiate between universal realities when you're dealing with all of mankind that we have spoken about in the past. Dealing with all of mankind when we're interacting as a whole humanity throughout the whole world, then we have to begin to come to universal realities, meaning that conceptual ideas that apply to all of mankind, not parochial ideas that only apply to a neighborhood group. So we're not just speaking of just Jews or just Christians or just Muslims. We have to begin in this day and time to read scripture as it applies to all of mankind, not to just one nationality or racial group. So looking at this, we have our outline for today is the heavenly religions. All prophets demonstrated the Sunnah. And the Sunnah is the tradition. We could say the traditions of the prophets, or the traditions that Allah has revealed to the prophets that they demonstrate from the scripture. The life demonstration of the scripture, we could say. The traditional life demonstration of the scripture. This is the Sunnah. And all prophets demonstrated the Sunnah. Serve the life we find in scripture, which is the Sunnah. Moral and intellectual life working together. For the Qur'an, which is the word we're going to concentrate on, differentiate between guidance and deception. And the Qur'an confirms what came before. The Qur'an being the final scripture confirming what came before. So there are Jews, Christians, and Muslims who refer the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam as the heavenly religion. That is because they see their books from which the religion is derived as being sent down as a communication from Allah, from the high skies of man's spiritual realities. And they are all conforming, agreeing, and are congruent with each other, as well as correcting and advancing what man has written in them, where he strayed or wandered off from the reality. Or we could say, making clear what man has written in scriptures, in previous scriptures, though he had sincerity in writing, or the people have lost the message because of the ascending nature in which man was writing, sometimes because of language. The people have strayed because of misunderstanding the language, and in the final scripture, Allah is making it clear. Thus, the Qur'an, the final revelation, or the final scripture, has been left intact of its original presentation, confirming what was sent before. So as we have said over the month, it is best, if you're studying scripture, to study all the scriptures. If you are a Christian, not only should you read the Bible, but you should read Qur'an also. It would help you understand the Bible. And this is needed more now than ever, to understand scripture and how scripture itself serves the life. These scriptures, which in the Arabic term Torah, the Torah, Injil, and the Qur'an, but for common sense, we would say the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Qur'an, were accompanied by men demonstrating the life, the Sunnah, that Allah wants for humanity. Essentially, what Allah is saying to us is that human life is good enough, strong enough to support the responsibilities that Allah created for us, starting with the Prophet Adam as Khalifa. These responsibilities are not only for our individual selves or our families or neighborhoods and communities, but for the whole life of mankind throughout the world. We are to see ourselves, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, as one community following the Sunnah revealed in the heavenly scriptures. This is the bigger picture that we have as religious people. We are to represent the life we find in scriptures, be guided by that life, and serve that life. In each of us is the power or the energy and the goodness that we can attain the life that Allah wants for us if we have the curiosity and the willing to set aside the prejudiced attitudes that has corrupted our thinking about scriptures and look into the scriptures to see what Allah is saying to us. Let us see what Allah's plan for humanity is and know that He, Allah, has selected a few in the history of humanity to establish them as examples for us, called the prophets. So when we speak of the Sunnah, when we're speaking of the Sunnah, we're speaking of the Sunnah that is in the scripture that is practiced by all the prophets, including Muhammad the prophet. The prayer and the peace be upon all of them. If we put Allah first, when we read the Qur'an, then we will come away with the broad picture that Allah is giving us, that we have a relationship, a kinship with the people of all scriptures. If no one else understands this, then the Muslim should understand this, because when reading the Qur'an, we could see where Allah is addressing all of the people of Scripture. It's Linnas, for all of mankind. The Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims are one brotherhood of the heavenly Scriptures. The common denominator for all people is that all people are working with two hands as we make the connection, and that is the moral life and the intellectual life stems from the two. You have the two hands, the two sides, or we can even say the symmetry of man. We can say the moral life, the sensitive soul, the emotional life that Allah gave us, and or along with the educated life, the sciences, the intellectual life that Allah also afforded us, both are working together. This is man in his perfect symmetry, born in this perfect symmetry, having the potential or the propensity for both. Because of the great advances we have made in science and technology, and the advances we have made in human nature and science working together, we have to become more socially mature. Many of our people take too long to mature because we do not have the ability to differentiate for the kind. So it takes us too long, especially the African American. The African American is slow in maturing. Many of us, at the age of 35, are just we're acting as though we're 18. We're too slow. We're too far behind. Even as Muslims, we're too far behind. We're too slow. Some of us are 40, 50 years old before we decide to even look at Scripture, when we should have been given Scripture at age 18, at age 16. We should be studying Quranic Arabic, speaking specific to the Muslim now. We should be having Quranic Arabic taught as children, and not just to play with them, to give them rhymes and rhythms, but to differentiate, to comprehend. But some of us, we just now, after wasting our whole life with games, fun and play, and sometimes that's how religion is given to us, we're 50 years old before we begin to sit down and become serious. That's a retarded humanity, a retarded group who decide to look at the educational side of their makeup, decide, well, I think I'll settle down and have show some curiosity for education now. What we're saying is that we cannot differentiate between what is guidance and what is deception. And many of us follow deception. We are sacrificing the gifts of guidance from Allah and chasing after or following deception. Just look, take a look at our life and see how much of our income, sit down and figure it out if you want, how much of our income goes towards the improvement of our human nature. How much do we spend to improve upon this original human nature that we're born with? To elevate it, to stand up in its perfect symmetry and become enlightened by the guidance from Allah. How much do we spend? And then look at how much of our efforts go towards improving our life in deception, in us being or becoming deceivers. Think about what you do on a daily basis and see how much are you spending time in improving this good original nature, and how much you are spending time in deception. Just looking in the mirror, first thing in the morning, improving upon deception. Look at your language, deception. Look at your culture, a culture of deception. Look at your expression in the culture, deception. Look at the religious leaders right now with the month of Ramadan, deception. Deceiving its audience. Imams deceiving their audience. Or don't know any better, or have no curiosity in what they're doing. Just repeating something that they heard through the grapevine, not from looking at scripture. No matter how advanced we get in the educational process that this society affords us, speaking of secular education, no matter how powerful we become, we are not safe from the danger of losing our soul, losing our family, losing our community life, losing the life of our nation, if we allow the influences that are against the good, healthy, moral, natural life to take over the soul. Or that takes over the soul. They'll be taken over. If we're not careful of just pursuing secular education, trying to get more money and become more powerful, and not looking at the sunnah, the life that we're to serve, that we're created to serve, then over a period of time, you will see that we have lost everything. Our own soul, the family, community, the whole people become lost. Being established in the conscious moral life is what gives us our most excellent stance. And if we lose that, we will topple over to become the lowest of the low of Allah's creatures. I just read every day how many of us in our relationships, first thing come up is finance. Very rarely is there a discussion of moral substance. Finance and deception. That's what our relationships are based upon. There were no people calling themselves Muslims in our conclusion. There were no people calling themselves Muslims when the Qur'an was revealed to Muhammad the Prophet. Actually, There was no people calling themselves Christians when Jesus was on the scene. And as we can see, if we have the following, if we have been following the logic, Muhammad the Prophet was not introducing a new religion. He was not introducing something new, but confirming what had come before. If we really study the scripture, the Qur'an, we will see that. So we can say that the Qur'an is a book for all people, linnas, for all people. It was revealed for all people. Allah teaches us in the Qur'an not only to differentiate between guidance and deception, but also to differentiate between the concrete and the abstract universal realities. Allah teaches us in the Qur'an His signs, that He gives us metaphors, symbols, rituals, etc., that are pointing to a higher reality. And we have to have Furqan to know the difference. That is the important factor in us living the life of religious people. That not only do we have to have the scripture, but we have to have the Furqan that goes along with the scripture in order for us to advance life. I thank you for taking the time to listen this morning. Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. And tomorrow will be our final presentation. Thank you again. Assalamu alaikum.